Peer Review is a series of podcasts designed to shed light on the extraordinary breadth and diversity of talent that sit in the House of Lords. The House of Lords often gets a bad rap because it is thought to be a house of cronies and it is an unelected house. But I hope through these interviews you will see that there is this extraordinary talent, there is a great knowledge and experience, and with that I leave you to draw your own conclusions. Well, my guest is Malcolm Pearson, Lord Pearson of Rannoch of the Bridge of Gower, which is a great Scottish title. Malcolm, we were both in the insurance business. You were there earlier than I was, and you were successful at an extraordinary young age of 22. And I came across your name over something called the Savanita affair, which I want to talk about in a minute. Leading up to you starting that business, you, like many of us in the insurance world, didn't go to university. You went to school. You were given the option, presumably, of the guards and some other sort of useless job like we ended up doing, and we ended up in insurance. But Malcolm, great to see you. And so how did it all start?
When I left school, I landed this really unusual job with a completely crazy and wonderful Italian Contessa, Suni Ratazzi Agnelli. And she was
part of the Agnelli family.
Gianni Agnelli's sister. There were 6 of them, but she was one of them.
So the great Fiat,
all that
Ferrari dynasty.
I mean, I knew nothing about it at all. I'd been brought up on Rannoch Moor for all my holidays, and not anywhere near that sort of world. But she was looking, her children, all 6 of them, she felt were rather indisciplined, and indeed they were. And so she was looking for a German SS boy to come and whip them all into shape. And when a friend of hers, who was a friend of my mother, said, "Oh, no, but Malcolm's looking for a job, and he's absolutely upright and straight, won't stand any nonsense, etc. Why don't you ask Malcolm to do this job?" And so, age 19, I was able to say to my father, he said it's got to be the army, the office, or a language. By a language, he meant French, of course. So when I said to him, "Papa, thank you very much," I said, "it's a language and it's Italian, and I'm going to stay with these people," he wasn't less pleased until he discovered who they were. And, of course, then he saw sort of insurance prospects and that sort of thing.
And your father was in insurance?
My father was a colleague of Harvey Bowring.
At C.T. Bowring?
At C.T. Bowring. Oh. And he really went into there after the First War. He was a pioneer of aviation insurance,
right? Because
aeroplanes were just starting, and airlines and things. And having been in the flying corps during the war, he knew all the people who were starting up their national airlines. And so that's where his career was, in aviation insurance.
And so you followed in your father's footsteps, went to C.T. Bowring,
yeah,
and then after a few years, thought they were making more, as I did. But you started even younger. I started at 20. We started our business when I was 25, 22 in those days.
Yes.
Starting the Lloyd's business, you thought you could make more money than they could, and you started a firm called Pearson, Webb and Springbett.
Yes. Webb having been the sort of manager of the department I was in, and my father was saying how wonderful this department was, and the director of the department was really amazing, the board, how clever he was. I knew it wasn't the director of the department at all. I knew it was John Webb, and then John Webb and David Springbett. David Springbett's father having been the director of insurance at British European Airways, British Airways and all that, a client of my father. They said they wanted to set off on their own because, believe it or not, they'd been told that they would never be a director of the Bowring companies because they hadn't been to the right schools. So when I heard they were setting off together, I said, "Whoopee, can I come too?"
And of course, the foundation of the business was not just the ones you said, but the Agnelli family business, Fiat.
Well, they were. They were shareholders when we started. 2 members of the family took 10% each. I mean, the capital was £18,000, and it wasn't, it was small bear.
There was a lot of money in those days.
Yeah, it not one bad.
Yeah.
Well, I'd been left 15,000 by an uncle in Glasgow, so that's why I shoved it into that. And they came along, and right from the start, because I'd been good friends with them and been trying to keep their children in order in the summer and that sort of thing, they trusted me. And they knew that, quite a lot of their insurance empire was corrupt. And they sort of vaguely wanted to do something about it.
Right.
So they said, Malcolm, we'd like you to do this, take this business, I'm afraid, away from Willis Faber. And, we want you to let us know what's going on, really.
And I came across this because I was at Willis Faber at the time, and it was the big Lloyd's scandal, the Savanita affair. And you were at the epicenter of it. You had spoken earlier about the corruption that existed. Tell us about the Savanita affair, because it really was a seismic moment and a really brutal event.
Well, yes, I'd been PWS, my company, had been put in by the Annelis to become a reinsurance broker of the marine insurance company, the Seat, and the Seat handled all the
insurance,
the Fiat transport insurances all over the world, and I was starting to do the reinsurances of Seat. And I went to see a director of Fiat in central Turin, who was the one who put us in touch with all the branches all over the world so that we could go, because they were all corrupt. The local managers were ripping it off. And so Springbet went round one after another of these and sort of straightened them all out. But this director of Fiat in Turin, when a claim had been made for 301 cars, which had caught fire on board the good ship Savanita en route to the United States of America. And these 301 cars had been unloaded because they were totally burnt and useless, and were shipped off to the Fiat dealer in Naples, where it soon became clear that there was nothing wrong with any of them. And they were being sold at a 20% discount on the open market. And this I discovered because this director in Fiat Turin, when I'd been to see him, he didn't say anything. He just wrote on a piece of paper and gave it to me. 301 cars burnt, ? Where are they now? ? Was anything wrong with them? ? And so, having got this piece of paper, I came back to London. And I said to Roy Hill, the underwriter, I've got this extraordinary thing on this wretched claim, which you're dragging your feet on. He said, I'm dragging my feet on it because there isn't a survey report. Could we have a survey? And so that's where the Savanita came. And once I knew, I suppose I was a bit priggish really, but I thought, well, once I know this is a fraud, I can't collect it, because I asked Treasury Council opinion. I said, they said, no, if you collect that fraud, you will be part of it. You must have nothing to do with it.
Anyway, Willis Faber decided that they could collect the claim, and they wanted the Fiat business back, and they went in and collected it.
Well, they did in the end, but it was a long story, and they did in the end collect 96% of it, purely because the market couldn't withstand the pressure of the Willis Faber account.
It was the biggest account.
Yeah, it was the biggest account in the market. And Roy Hill, our underwriter, very, very brave man, he wasn't the normal Willis Faber lead underwriter.
Yeah.
So anyway, it got paid, and I didn't know quite what to do about it. I thought, I've got to blow this up. This really isn't right. Do I know anyone in the press? But of course I didn't. The press in those days we didn't talk to them really.
Yeah.
But I bumped into my friend Jonathan Aitken, hadn't seen him for years. And I thought, well, you're a bit of a journalist, Jonathan. Can you, do you know, how do I get this story into the open? Because I was and he came round, read all the files and everything, went to see the speaker, old Tony Pandey, and he fixed the Easter adjournment debate. He gave it to Jonathan. And Jonathan, in the Easter adjournment debate of, I suppose, whatever it would be, 70.
Doesn't matter.
60, it doesn't matter. Late 60s, early 70. blew the whole story in Hansard. And then, of course, it exploded. And Lloyd's then said, well, it's all very well. They set up an inquiry to look into this thing, and the inquiry found against me. And like idiots, they released it to the press before I could see it. And then the press went wild. So then we had the Fisher report and everything, and eventually a new act of Parliament.
Parliament was passed on these things.
And it's been squeaky clean ever since.
That was the start of your campaign against corruption. But fast forward to 1990 when you were made a peer.
Mm.
What happened in between?
I spent a lot of time actually in education. I was the representative of commerce on the body which validated all the polytechnics. Okay, and as such, it validated all the teacher training courses in the country. And I discovered that the teacher training courses had gone Marxist. They'd been taken over some time before by Marxist infiltration, actually coming straight from the Soviet Union, permeate the whole curriculum with issues of gender, race, and class was a thing. And so I went to Brown Griffiths was Margaret. I went to Margaret and I said, look, do you know this is going on? And she said, funny enough, I'd really suspected when I was Secretary of State for Education in 1972, I really should have done more of it. Can you get me the ammo? So I got her all the ammo. And so she said, right, I'm going to, this is 1990. I'm having a reshuffle at Christmas. I want you to go to the Lords. And you will become the Minister of State for teacher training in the Lords. And, you'll report to me. And I said, thank you very much, Margaret. How much will I see of you? Well, you can have an hour every month, she said. And I said, yes. And what do you want me to do about teacher training? I want you to get rid of it, she said. I want you. But it never happened because in 1990 I had just gone into the Lords.
You were her last
I was our last one. Yeah. So I'd sneaked into the Lords to go and do teacher training and all that. And then the job wasn't there. And so Hesketh said I had to do something. So he put me on the European Committee of the Lords. And that's where I read the treaties of Rome and I thought the whole thing.
Well, more of that in a minute. I mean, there's no question that you must be the bravest politician in the Lords. But before that time, you had established the Rannoch Charitable Trust, and one of the people who you had worked and been involved with very closely was Aleksandr Solzhenitsyn, of course.
Yes.
And how did that happen?
In 1983, he'd left the Soviet Union by then. He was writing books in Vermont. But in 1983, he was awarded the Templeton Prize for Religion on condition. He came to London and collected the cheque from Prince Philip for 157,000 quid. And so very reluctantly, he said, oh, okay, I'll go and do it. And he came to London and he collected the cheque from Prince Philip in this little ceremony, 150. And as he was walking down the palace steps on the way out, he said to a flanky alongside him, and it is all right if I publish my acceptance speech, which is very short, as samizdat, which is the little tiny bits of freedom and free literature which circulated in the Soviet Union before the Soviet Union collapsed. And the flanky replied, oh no, Mr. Solzhenitsyn, you can't say a word of this. It's entirely private. You're not. And so the great man exploded. And he thought he'd been dragged over here under false pretexts to get this check so he could send it to his people with a little tiny thing. This is my acceptance speech to Prince Philip at Buckingham Palace. And this would encourage all his network of underground network in the Soviet Union. Anyway, he exploded and said, I'm going back to Vermont this afternoon. I'm not going to go to the Guildhall this afternoon and address hundreds of the faithful. I've had enough of the great and the good. And very luckily, someone knew that I had connections with Prince Philip through my then father-in-law, Martin Charteris, had just given up being the private secretary. So I got on to Martin. I said, Martin, the balloon's gone up. Can you help? Because the great man has been told by the palace that he can't publish his Samizdat. And Martin said, "Oh, give me a minute." I don't think Martin even made a telephone call. He rang back 2 minutes later. I was quite spoken to. It was perfect. Right? Publish and be damned. Wonderful.
Yeah.
and so then Solzhenitsyn did do the Guildhall, and the one place he'd always wanted to take a holiday in was Scotland. And he'd never been to Scotland, and so we went up on the train.
And you hosted him
2 or 3 days, and in the wilderness and all that, and it was a wonderful experience. His English wasn't brilliant. Natalia, his wife, and in one of vodka or two, we were able to converse.
And what did you make of him?
Well, it's like living, I don't know, with the prophet Isaiah in the house. He had a wonderful sense of humour. He could be irascible. But it was really the only 2 or 3 days holiday he ever took, according to his family. And we just went out into the wilderness and we walked, and he loved it. And I took him for a walk in the one slightly amusing. I took him for a walk in the Blackwood, the ancient pine forest, and we came on this huge ant's nest that was there. And he looked at it and he sort of poked it and got very. And one of the ants started crawling around in his beard and everything. He roared with laughter and he said, "Socialism works, you see."
Anyway, you kept in touch with him. It must have been fascinating. And in 2007, of course, you were awarded the Henry Scoop Jackson Award.
Yes.
For values and vision in politics,
Yes.
which is an extraordinary achievement. And that is presumably based upon the very brave decision that you decided to stand up against the Conservative Party about the European Union.
Yes.
So where did that, going back, you said when we were in government, you looked very closely at all the treaties.
Well, I actually made the mistake of reading the Maastricht Treaty in draft. And there was a wonderful organization called the British Management Data Foundation. And still, they used to take these new treaties and analyze them. And what they did, they had the first treaty in one column, the next treaty, and so on. And you could read across the page, and you could absolutely see where the project was going, which was entirely to destroy national democracies and replace it with, the bureaucracy of Brussels and the whole project. It was absolutely obvious. And so when I saw that, I went to Aleksandr. I got myself put on the Lords European Committee, so I was able to look into it. And so I became an implacable enemy of the project of European integration, I suppose, simply because I could see where it's going, and I felt that national democracies were worth defending, and particularly ours. And
And in 2004, the Conservative Party felt they'd had enough of you and expelled you. What was that all about? I mean, this subject, presumably.
I can't remember why I was expelled.
What was the straw that broke the camel's back?
Well, I think it was Brexit. Well, we didn't call it Brexit then. We called it, what was it, 2004?
Yeah.
Was it? I mean, I think it was we parted company really because I could see that under David Cameron we were never going to do anything about.
Well, Cameron wasn't leader in 2004.
Who was? I can't remember.
Well, the party had just come out of the Hague election, so we were into Duncan Smith. And of course, both of them were euro-sceptics. But I think you called upon Conservatives to vote for the UK Independence Party.
Yes, David Willoughby Brooke and I called on Conservatives to leave the Conservative Party and join UKIP, which was, we'd just met Farage and all that. And quite a few people did actually join us, quite a few peers, including Caroline Cox. And she was sacked from the party as well, believe it or not, and has been a crossbencher ever since.
Yeah.
And, I mean, that was, I could just see that it was never going to happen. And that the only way we could do it was, I spotted Farage quite early as a sort of, a genius, really. So that's where the whole euro-sceptic thing started, yes.
And you managed to do one incredible thing, to be disliked by the Labour benches and disliked by the Conservative benches, which was
Yes,
and I remember
and
that
the Liberal Democrats.
every time when I joined, oh yes, well definitely, every time there was anything to do with Europe, you would pop up standing at the back of the Labour benches and say something about Europe, and people would roll their eyes and sort of say, "Not again,
not him again."
But how brave you were, because you were almost a lone voice and stuck to your guns throughout.
Well, there was Peter Shaw, Norman Tebbit, Max Beloff. There were 3 or 4, but I made most of the noise, I think, probably yet. And I then discovered something. I actually quite like being disliked by Liberal Democrats. I take pleasure from it, I'm afraid. It's awful. I say it's not very brave. I mean, collectively. Personally, they're extremely nice. But when they come at you en masse in the chamber, it's rather fun.
So let's talk about the UKIP. And I mean, to start with, it was a sort of mixed bag of people who assembled under Nigel Farage. It made very little progress in terms of the UK winning elections and things like that, but had a big hit in Europe. What brought it all together, and how did you keep the flame alive until you get to the point where the referendum happens?
It did actually win the European elections on proportional representation. UKIP actually won a national election, but it was the first past the post thing that completely screwed it, really. And I think in the end we did manage to get the message out to the point where, it's just happened.
But the party itself, who were the driving forces within it?
Nigel was always there. Yeah. Really. And there were other good people in it, and David Willoughby and I, helped it a bit and all that, I think. And, the sort of really serious euro-sceptics like David Stoddart, number one, Peter Shaw, Max Bell, they never actually joined UKIP, but they were very strong there. We knew we weren't idiotic in the Lords. But, of course, the Conservative Party in those days was absolutely wedded to the damn thing. And the Liberal, Labour, they all were, really. And it is quite, it's rather nice that the King has just signed the bill that takes us out altogether. Yeah. We are now out of the damn thing.
And, I mean, you look back on this, not unsurprising, with great pleasure.
Yes. Yes, I think I've been very lucky.
And how do you intend to keep the vote honest? Because clearly there's a lot of backward pressure, particularly from the civil service, to not carry out the will of the British people, as some people would describe.
Yeah, that really should be. I mean, the blob and everything that Jacob Rees-Mogg was saying and so on. And I think 98% of civil servants didn't want Brexit. So even if you get it through in the front line, you get it through Parliament and everything, you're then faced with, as we now see, endless obfuscation, etc., etc., etc. But I think it will go through. I think I don't know. I think it will happen. I don't think. Also because they know now that people are looking at them in a way that they didn't before. Just the civil servants who couldn't touch it. But I'm about to start asking questions of the names of these civil servants. I'm going to get them into Hansard on the record. Well, the government won't answer. But I think once you start saying, well, who are actually these people? Who are the human beings who are frustrating this thing? You may get somewhere. We'll see. It should be quite fun.
Why did you resign from UKIP in 2019?
Gosh, why did I resign from... I can't remember. No, I can't remember. David Willoughby and I think, resigned on the same day. I think we just felt it had run its course, and I think it may have been doing something.
And the job was done.
Yeah, the job was done, really.
And now there's a...
And they were quarrelling like hell, and in amongst themselves, and I couldn't be bothered, really.
Yeah, and now you sit as an independent, but presumably we hear of various other Eurosceptic parties starting. Are you not inclined to?
No, I think I'm too old now, really. There's this reform thing, isn't there? Nigel's, and I don't know. I've never been a party political animal, but party politics bores me. I think it's what is the word? It's sort of tribal, really.
Yeah. Going back, because you are remarkably brave and certainly stand up for what you're doing. I mean, the part of UKIP was described as being racist.
Well, I don't know that it was. I'm colourblind. I've always been colourblind. I simply don't see the difference. And I don't think there may have been, UKIP, yes. I mean, UKIP had quite a lot of what they call right-wing elements in it, and probably there were racists there, but they weren't assisted by me, or they weren't my friends, or anything like that. I mean, I just, as I say, it bores me. I don't see the difference.
Well, Malcolm, you've never been frightened of putting your head above the parapet, that's for sure. And controversy has been part of your life, but it's built on by very firm and virtuous belief. And I'm really grateful for you for sparing the time. Thank you very much.
Well, the virtuous belief, I mean, it comes because I did have this religious experience when I was having an operation, and the anesthetic failed, but the paralyzing drug continued. 3-hour operation, and in those, I mean, lots of people have had them. It's not unique, but in that you either die or you go somewhere rather wonderful, which strengthens you, and that did happen to me in 1977, and it changes everything really. So if you say brave, I mean, I don't know if it's brave or not, but it does. It makes you less worried about the standards of where we are now.
Well, I think anybody who takes on the and sticks their neck out is often brave in politics. But Malcolm, thanks very much indeed.
Not at all.
Thanks very much.